Why did the instructors' voices always sound louder when they called her name? Walls! Sergeant Brennan's shout cut across the rifle range, sharp enough to make the other soldiers glance at her before returning to their scopes. Stacy swallowed hard and adjusted her grip on the M4. 3 weeks into advanced marksmanship, and she hadn't hit a single qualifying group. Not one. The sun was bright, the kind that revealed every flaw. Heat shimmered above the dirt berms. Her breathing matched the pounding of her heart. She aligned the sights, steady, squeeze, then flinch. The shot cracked into the distance. The target barely moved. Another miss. From the firing line, a ripple of chuckles. Not cruel exactly, but enough to remind her she didn't belong here. "What exactly are you aiming at, Corporal?" "The mountains." Brennan's sarcasm drew more laughter. Stacy lowered the rifle, cheeks burning. Her score sheet looked like a scatterplot of failure. Bullets spread like confetti in a windstorm. She didn't need to glance at her neighbors' targets to know theirs looked clean, clustered, professional. Soldiers younger than her, faster, sharper. She packed up slower than the rest, giving herself time to swallow the knot in her throat. 3 weeks of humiliation. 3 weeks of being the worst shot on the line. And yet every night, when the others went to the gym or to sleep, she disappeared into the base library. She studied ballistics manuals until her eyes ached. She memorized drop tables, crosswind charts, and atmospheric density equations. Her notebooks filled with precise handwriting, neat rows of calculations. She knew more about bullet physics than most instructors, but knowledge on paper didn't change what happened when her finger squeezed the trigger. Failure was easy to measure. What nobody knew was that Stacy walls had been measured before, in places that didn't exist on any map, in moments that had left invisible marks deeper than scars. But for now here, she was just the soldier who couldn't hit paper at 200 yards. During chow, she felt the weight of silence more than the clatter of trays. Conversation always seemed to stop when she sat down. She ate quickly, head low, mechanical. The whispers still reached her ears. Maybe she was supposed to be in computers. Clerical mistake. Painful to watch. The words stung less than the glances, pity mixed with scorn. At night in the barracks, she heard laughter muffled through thin walls, other soldiers bonding. She was invisible except when she failed in public. Isolation was heavier than her rucksack. And yet a part of her accepted it. Being underestimated had its uses. The stress-fire exercise was her breaking point. Explosions sounded, horns blared, the environment designed to simulate chaos. She shouldered the rifle, tried to focus, but the first blast made her flinch so hard the muzzle dipped. Shots went wide, one after another. By the end, only one target out of 8 fell, barely qualifying. "That's it," Brennan muttered. "This program isn't for you. Try something quieter, maybe library science. No loud noises there." The others smirked, pretending not to watch her humiliation. She kept her face calm even as her chest tightened. She wasn't angry. Anger was easy. What she felt was something quieter, heavier, resignation. That night, alone in the armory, she stripped her rifle down to its smallest pieces. The metal parts gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Her hands moved with practiced precision, too precise for someone supposedly incompetent. Master Sergeant Kate Morrison noticed. She had a habit of noticing what others missed. The way Stacy sat in classrooms, always in the back corner, never with her back to the door. The way she ate, quick, eyes scanning like every meal was a checkpoint. The way she walked, never distracted, always aware of sight lines. Those weren't the habits of a failed student. They were survival instincts. When Morrison saw Stacy hunched over ballistics manuals in the library, she finally approached. "Interesting reading material," Morrison said. Stacy looked up, startled. "Just trying to understand the theory better." "Most students start with fundamentals. You're studying graduate-level material while failing undergraduate tests." Morrison sat across from her. Maybe you're overthinking, or maybe the standard approach isn't working for you. Tell me, what did you do before this program? Military intelligence, analysis work. A pause, nothing relevant. But Morrison caught the hesitation. The kind of hesitation people had when their past wasn't supposed to exist. The next day a colonel arrived. Davidson. Weathered face, sharp eyes. He observed Stacy on the range. Watched her miss easy shots, fumble reloads. To anyone else she looked incompetent. "That's her?" he asked Morrison quietly. "That's her." He lowered the binoculars. "Remarkable. If I didn't know better, I'd believe it." "Believe what?" Morrison asked. "That she's exactly what everyone thinks she is. But she's not. Stacy Walls doesn't exist. That identity was created 18 months ago." Morrison felt her stomach tighten. "Then who is she?" "Someone who's operated in places we don't put on maps. Someone conditioned to suppress her abilities until authorization is given. Think of it like a leash on a guard dog. She looks harmless until someone says the right words." Morrison turned her eyes back to the woman walking away, rifle slung low, shoulders slumped in defeat, and wondered what leash was keeping her bound, and what would happen if it ever broke. The fourth week brought news that silenced every whisper. Hostages, a terrorist cell, remote facility in the Colorado mountains, among them General Morrison's daughter. Suddenly the program wasn't training anymore. It was deployment, real lives, real consequences. Teams were assigned. Stacy Walls placed on Team 2, lowest risk spotter role, a safe position for the soldier nobody trusted with a rifle. As the Black Hawk thundered toward the mountains, her teammates laughed at her intensity. She sat hunched over topographical maps, calculating wind corridors. "Look at her pretending to be tactical," one muttered. But Morrison, watching from the command chopper, saw something else. For the first time in weeks, Stacy was perfectly still. No nervous tics, no fumbling. Her eyes locked on the terrain, her mind calculating distances, ranges, possibilities. Something had shifted. On the ridge, the sniper teams prepared. Hostiles positioned with perfect fields of fire. Too perfect. A third sentry hidden behind rock, untouchable from normal angles. "Range is over 2 miles, Team 1 sniper said. "Impossible shot, beyond any weapon system." Stacy spoke quietly, almost to herself. "At this elevation, with wind at 8 to 12 knots, bullet drop would be about 52 inches." Silence, every head turned toward her. This was the same woman who missed at 200 yards. How did she know? Her eyes stayed on the ridge. "There's a position, north slope, clear line of sight, 2,140 meters." Morrison's voice cut through the radio. "Colonel Davidson, I need authorization for Sparrow 6. A pause, then, "Sparrow 6 is authorized." The words were code, a switch, a key in a lock. Stacy's head lifted as if waking from a dream. The slumped shoulders straightened. Her hands moved with sudden confidence. The woman who had failed for weeks was gone. "I need a Barrett, match-grade ammo, a spotter with range-finding gear. Get me on that ridge in 30 minutes. Her voice was calm, certain. Morrison saw what no one else understood yet. The failed soldier had just become someone else entirely. Anderson whispered to Burke as the helicopter lifted off. "What the hell just happened? Who is she?" Burke stared after Stacy, rifle in her arms, expression carved from stone. "I don't think we ever knew." The helicopter thudded in the thin mountain air, rotors straining against altitude and wind. Inside, Stacy checked the Barrett rifle as if it were an extension of her body. Every click, every adjustment smooth. No fumbling now. Corporal Jackson, hastily assigned as her spotter, watched in uneasy silence. Just hours ago, he'd seen her miss paper targets at 200 yards. Now she rattled off atmospheric equations that left him dizzy. She leaned close to the door. 30 seconds, ready rope. The pilot shouted over the noise, winds shifting hard up there. I can give you 30, no more. 30 is enough. The words weren't bravado, they were fact. When the rope dropped, she slid down first, landing on jagged rock at 9,000 feet. Jackson followed, boots slipping before finding purchase. The helicopter lifted, vanishing into the noise of wind. Suddenly the ridge was quiet, too quiet. Stacy unwrapped the Barrett, setting it up with ritual precision. Jackson raised his spotting scope, hands trembling, not from cold but from awe. Range, she asked, already knowing the answer. He measured 2,138 meters, winds shifting 8 to 11 knots northwest, gust pattern, 12-second cycle. She nodded once, adjusted the scope by fractions of fractions. At this distance, one click meant inches, inches meant lives. Through her scope, the sentry was a speck of darkness against rock. To any normal sniper, it was like aiming at a shadow of a man. To Stacy, it was geometry, a moving equation. Her breathing slowed, one inhale, one exhale. She settled into what other snipers called the zone. The world shrinking to a dot, a wind line, a heartbeat. Team 1 status, Morrison's voice over the radio. We've got eyes on 2 sentries ready to fire. No angle on 3rd. Copy, stand by for Sparrow 6. Jackson swallowed hard, watching Stacy's face. Calm, still, different from the nervous woman who had once flinched at a firecracker. She whispered into the mic, steady as stone. Target elimination in 3-2. The Barrett roared, thunder cracking across the mountain valley. The bullet took nearly 3 seconds to arrive. 3 seconds when 12 hostages' lives hung in suspension. Through the scope, she tracked it like she could see the invisible. The sentry shifted, turned his head, then dropped clean. Target 3 down, Jackson gasped. Almost at the same instant, targets 1 and 2 eliminated, came Team 1's confirmation. 3 sentries, gone, perfect synchrony. The valley exhaled silence. Jackson's scope fogged from his breath. That was impossible. No, Stacy replied, breaking the rifle down with precise movements. Just necessary. Below, the FBI hostage rescue team moved. Quiet shapes advancing toward the facility, now free from watchful eyes. The mission would live or die by seconds. In the command helicopter, Morrison let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She turned to Davidson. You see it now, she asked. Davidson's jaw was tight. I never doubted it. I just hoped we'd never need her. On the ridge, Jackson finally dared to speak. How did you know? How could you make that shot? Stacy checked her ammo, avoiding his eyes. Because I've made harder ones, in places that don't exist, on missions that never happened. He blinked, so this was easy. Daylight spotter, radio support, yes, easy. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Jackson heard something beneath it. Not arrogance, sadness. 20 minutes later, the call came through. All hostages recovered, all hostiles neutralized, no casualties. The chopper returned for pickup. Jackson climbed in, still staring at her like she was a puzzle he'd never solve. When they landed back at Fort Carson, Anderson and Burke were waiting in the debriefing room. They had heard whispers of the impossible shot, the chatter across comms, but seeing Stacy walk in carrying the Barrett, it was like watching a ghost step out of legend. So, Anderson muttered, eyes wide, guess we were wrong. Stacy set the rifle down gently, as if it were something sacred. Were you? They frowned. I still miss at 200 yards, she said softly, still freeze at stress fire. Tomorrow I'll probably fail again. She met their eyes, steady now. But today I was authorized to be who I really am. The question is, she paused, which version of me does the Army want? Her words hung heavier than the rifle itself. But the Army didn't ask questions out loud. Official reports buried the truth. The file read, successful mission, precision fire from multiple teams, No mention of impossible ballistics. No mention of Sparrow Six. To most of Fort Carson, it was just another exercise-turned-operation. But among the 20 students, the truth spread in whispers. A shot at over 2,000 meters, perfect hit, lives saved. Burke whispered to Anderson later, "The math doesn't add up. Bullet drop alone should have been impossible." Anderson shook his head. Physics shouldn't allow it, but she made it. And yet the next morning, Stacy was back on the range, missing shots at 200 yards, flinching at loud noises, as if nothing had happened. Jackson, now her reluctant shadow, leaned close to Morrison during debrief. "It's like she's two different people. Yesterday, she calculated atmospheric pressure in her head and made the shot of the century. Today, she's back to fumbling reloads." Morrison nodded slowly. "She's not two people, she's one. You're just not seeing the whole picture." In truth, Stacy knew exactly what was happening. The conditioning didn't simply switch off. Sparrow Six was an ignition key. Without it, she defaulted back into limitation, into camouflage. At night, she lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, hearing Anderson's mocking voice echo in her memory. "Some people just don't belong here." Maybe he was right. Maybe she didn't belong here, because her place was somewhere else entirely. The next morning, Captain Foster gathered the class. "Due to operational requirements, some students will be reassigned. Evaluations will continue, but not all assignments will reflect performance on the range." He glanced at Stacy as he said it. Anderson frowned. "That's not fair, she's been failing everything." Burke nodded. "She should have been dismissed weeks ago." But Morrison caught the look in Foster's eye. Orders had come from higher up, decisions made above his clearance. Stacy Walls wasn't going anywhere. That evening, a folded note awaited her on her bunk. "Report to LT Morrison's office at 800. Reassignment counseling." Not punishment, not dismissal, something else. She sat on her bed, the note trembling slightly in her hands. She thought of the three options she'd always carried inside: hide in mediocrity, vanish into shadows, or risk being extraordinary. The conditioning told her she had no choice, but a voice deep inside whispered otherwise. What if this was the beginning of something neither she nor her instructors could yet imagine? She closed her eyes, saw again the speck of a man through the scope, the long, silent flight of the bullet, the moment when everything she was, every failure, every humiliation, snapped into alignment and became purpose. Maybe the shot hadn't just saved the general's daughter. Maybe it had saved her. When she reported the next morning, she found not just Morrison, but Colonel Davidson, and a civilian in a dark suit who introduced herself simply as Miss Carter from the Department of Defense. "Corporal Walls," Carter said, opening a folder. "Your performance raises questions about your future. Officially, you fail at basic marksmanship. Unofficially," she glanced at Davidson, "we know the truth runs deeper." Davidson leaned forward. "The question is simple, Stacy. Are you more valuable as a soldier who appears limited, or as an asset who operates outside the lines?" The room was silent, Morrison's eyes on her, Carter's pen poised, Davidson's expression unreadable. Stacy swallowed, feeling the weight of every misfire, every whisper, every moment on the ridge when lives hung on her steady hand. She answered carefully, "I serve wherever the Army needs me." But in her heart she wasn't so sure, because she knew the Army didn't always know what it needed. And sometimes the people it underestimated the most were the ones it couldn't afford to lose. Why did the room feel colder than the hallway? Stacy sat stiffly in the metal chair, hands folded, watching the civilian's pen scratch across a folder. Miss Carter, calm, efficient, unreadable. Beside her, Colonel Davidson leaned back, studying Stacy as if she were an equation. And Morrison, steady as always, watching with eyes that seemed to ask questions without words. Three pairs of eyes, all waiting. "Your official record," Carter began, shows consistent failure to meet basic standards. She let the pause linger. But your operational performance suggests something else entirely. This creates a complication. Davidson tapped the folder. You're living two lives. To most of this base, you're an incompetent soldier. To us, you're Sparrow Six. So which one are you really? Stacy held their gaze. I serve where I'm told. Not good enough, Davidson said quietly. The words landed heavier than any insult she'd heard on the range. She had trained herself to survive mockery, whispers, the burn of being dismissed. But blunt honesty, not good enough, cut differently. Morrison leaned forward softer. Stacy, what do you want? The question froze her. Nobody had asked her that in years. Want? She thought of the mess hall whispers, the laughter when she flinched at explosions, the pity in Brennan's eyes when he told her maybe she should find a quieter career. Then she thought of the ridge, the way her breathing had slowed, her heart had steadied. The moment the bullet left the barrel and 3 seconds of silence stretched across eternity. Failure had felt heavy, but that shot had felt like coming home. I want to be useful, she said at last. Carter made a note, then you have options. They laid them out, one by one. Option 1, return to conventional service. Conditioning removed gradually. Become a competent soldier, nothing more. Normal. Option 2, stay in the shadows. Teach techniques to select candidates while maintaining conditioning. Live between two worlds, hiding and revealing as needed. Option 3, full reactivation. Classified missions, unseen successes, invisible existence. Sparrow 6 forever. 3 lives, 3 versions of herself. Morrison's voice broke the silence. And how did it feel, Stacy, making that shot? Stacy closed her eyes. She didn't need to think. Like remembering who I really am. And failing in front of everyone for weeks. She opened them again, like wearing a mask that didn't fit. Carter shut the folder. You have 24 hours to decide. 24 hours. To choose between invisibility, mediocrity, or shadows. But Stacy already knew none of those were enough. That evening, the rifle range hummed with activity. Final evaluations loomed and students drilled hard. Through the chain-link fence, Stacy watched Anderson and Burke hitting targets at 800 meters, proud, competent, confident. They looked exactly like what the Army wanted snipers to be. Solid, reliable, predictable. She should have felt envy. Instead, she felt something else, clarity. She didn't want to be predictable. The month of failure had been suffocating, like being shackled inside a smaller body, a weaker mind. It had reminded her what it was like to be ordinary. And now she couldn't go back. At chow, Anderson surprised her. Hey, Walls, you coming to the range tonight? Extra training. The first time in weeks anyone had invited her anywhere. Burke added, final evals coming. Still time to tighten up. She forced a smile. Thanks, but I've got things to figure out. They nodded, turning back to their food. They had no idea that she could never tighten up because the mask of incompetence wasn't hers to remove. The conditioning allowed only one version of her at a time, and the Army still hadn't decided which version it wanted. That night alone in her quarters, she stared at 3 blank sheets of paper. She labeled them in her head, normal, half-hidden, shadow. But as she stared, she realized something. None of them fit. She remembered Jackson's awe on the ridge, the way Morrison had watched her transformation with quiet understanding, the way Anderson had said some people just don't belong here, and how right he'd been, but not for the reasons he thought. She didn't belong here, but maybe she belonged somewhere new, somewhere not yet written. She pulled out a notepad and began writing. Not for herself, not exactly, for what came after, for soldiers like her and unlike her. She wrote about conditioning, about failure as camouflage, about using invisibility not as a curse but as a tool, about teaching what she knew without revealing everything, about raising the ceiling of what normal soldiers thought possible. She called it the Controlled Revelation Protocol. It was option 1, it was 2, it was 3. It was something else, something the Army hadn't thought to ask for. By dawn, the paper was 3 pages, neat handwriting, concise language, a proposal but also a challenge. She slid it into a folder, sealed it, and carried it to Morrison's office. The colonel's eyebrows rose when he read the title, Controlled Revelation Protocol. "It's not about hiding or revealing everything," Stacy said quietly. "It's about showing enough, gradually, teaching without exposing, conditioning as a teaching tool, not just a leash." Morrison read silently. Davidson leaned over her shoulder, skeptical at first, but his frown softened as the words unfolded. Carter entered minutes later, coffee in hand. She glanced at the paper. "You're proposing we weaponize the act of underestimation." Stacy shook her head. "No, we teach through it. Soldiers learn more when they think they're seeing the limits. Then we expand those limits step by step. They never see the whole picture, but they leave stronger than they came." Davidson studied her. "And you'd be the one to do it." "Yes." Silence filled the room. 3 decision-makers, 1 soldier who wasn't supposed to exist, and a thin folder that could change everything. Finally, Carter closed it and set it on the table. "We'll need to see a demonstration." That afternoon, Stacy stood before the very same students who had mocked her. Anderson, Burke, Jackson, all of them gathered in the briefing room, expecting a farewell speech from the woman who couldn't shoot straight. Instead, she said, "Today we're going to discuss atmospheric effects on long-range ballistics." Murmurs, confused glances. Then she started writing formulas on the board: wind gradient analysis, temperature stratification, pressure correlations, concepts none of them had ever seen in training. Burke raised a hand. "Ma'am, how extreme are we talking?" She looked at him evenly. "Distances where a single degree of temperature can move your shot by inches, where wind changes at altitude alter bullet flight in ways you never considered." Pen scratched furiously. Eyes widened. Even Anderson, who'd spent years hunting, leaned forward, scribbling notes. They thought she was teaching theory. What they didn't realize was that she was reshaping their reality. By the time they stepped onto the range, their heads were full of numbers they barely understood. She had them attempt shots at distances they'd never dreamed of. And one by one they hit. Anderson blinked as the steel rang at 1,200 meters. I don't understand. The math, it works." Stacy's voice was calm. "Mathematics doesn't lie. Understand the physics, predict the outcome." Burke hit his own target, jaw slack. "But how do you know these formulas are right?" She smiled faintly. "Because I've lived them." Morrison, watching from the observation booth, whispered to Davidson, "She's teaching them without revealing. They'll never know the level she's operating at, but they'll leave better than they ever thought possible." Davidson folded his arms, eyes still on the woman below. "It's brilliant, dangerous, but brilliant." Carter's expression remained unreadable, but she was taking notes faster than ever. By evening, the whispers among the students had changed. No more jokes about library science. Now it was murmurs of awe. "She knows things nobody else does. I've never heard this before. It changes everything. She just made me hit a shot I didn't think possible." Stacy heard the whispers, but this time she didn't shrink. She let them swirl around her like wind at altitude. Being underestimated had given her camouflage. Now, being believed would give her purpose. She wasn't choosing option 1, or 2, or 3. She was writing her own. And for the first time in years, Stacy Walls felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was leading. Why did they listen to her now, when weeks ago they wouldn't even share a table? Stacy walked along the line of shooters, their rifles resting on bipods, their eyes straining through scopes. The Colorado sun was brutal on the flat dirt range, but every student's focus burned hotter than the heat waves. "Just half a mil down," she told Anderson, crouching beside him. "You're not reading the mirage. See that shimmer? That's crosswind at 700 meters. It's bending your bullet left before it even stabilizes." He squinted, doubtful, but he adjusted. The next shot rang steel. Anderson's shoulders slumped in disbelief. "How did you?" "Because I've missed that shot 1,000 times," Stacy said, "until I learned to stop blaming myself and start reading the world around me." The others leaned closer, eavesdropping. She didn't raise her voice. Let curiosity do the work. Within minutes, the line of students was correcting shots not by luck but by comprehension. She wasn't teaching them how to be her. She was teaching them how to see what she saw. Morrison watched from the tower, arms folded. Davidson stood beside her, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "She's creating believers," Morrison murmured. Davidson's jaw tightened. "Belief is powerful, dangerous too." "You'd rather she stay invisible." "I'd rather she stay controllable." By evening, the students buzzed with energy. Conversations in the barracks shifted. No more mocking her missed shots. Now they replayed her lessons, scribbling formulas on notebooks, practicing range calls like gospel. "She taught me to read mirage." She explained Coriolis's drift like it was nothing. "She's different." Different, not incompetent anymore. Not Sparrow Six yet either. Something in between. And that was exactly what she wanted. But Stacy's nights told a different story. Alone, the mask slipped. She sat on her bunk, staring at her hands, remembering every time they had failed her. Every time she'd let the disguise of incompetence swallow her true self. The conditioning still held her. Without authorization, her mind pulled her back into failure, into hesitation. The moments of clarity, the ridge shot, the teaching breakthroughs, those came only when the army allowed it. And that gnawed at her. Because if her strength only existed by permission, was it really hers? Her doubts sharpened 1 week later. The class had been moved into field exercises, simulated overwatch on a rugged training site. Fake insurgents, mock hostages, blank rounds. But the terrain was real. The wind, the pressure, the stakes, real enough. "Pair off," the instructor barked. "Targets will appear at random distances. Spotters call, shooters fire. You'll be graded on communication as much as accuracy." Stacy was assigned as spotter for Burke. A test. A quiet message from above. Show us if you can teach while staying invisible. They set up on a ridge. Burke sighted in. Range. 1150, Stacy said without pause. He frowned at his rangefinder. "I'm reading 1132. Rangefinder's catching slope. Trust me, 1150. Burke hesitated, then dialed for 1132. Fired. The round went low, kicking dirt. Stacy didn't flinch. 1150, 2 clicks up, try again. He sighed, adjusted, fired. The target clanged, perfect hit. Burke blinked at her. "How did you?" "Because your eyes lie before your math does," she said softly. They moved to the next target and the next. Each time Burke doubted. Each time she corrected him. Each time the steel rang. By the end, his notebook was filled with numbers he'd never considered. Walking back, he finally said, "You're not teaching me to shoot. You're teaching me to see." She smiled faintly. Maybe that's all shooting ever was. But not everyone was convinced. Anderson approached her after the exercise, arms crossed. "You're hiding something." She kept her face neutral. "Everyone hides something." "Not like you. One day you can't hit a barn. Next day you're whispering numbers like you invented gravity." His eyes narrowed. "So which one's the real you?" She didn't answer because she couldn't. That night, Carter called her into a dimly lit office. "You're creating influence," Carter said flatly. "They trust you. They want to follow you. That's valuable. But it's also dangerous." Stacy stood at attention, silent. Carter's pen tapped the folder. Do not forget, your mask is not optional, it's policy. You reveal only what we decide. Stacy's voice was steady, but her chest ached with the words she didn't speak. What if the mask is killing me? Carter leaned closer. Understand this. You are not free, you are useful, and usefulness is what keeps you alive. The words haunted her. Useful, not free. Was that all she was? A tool, a weapon pulled from a locked case when convenient, then shoved back into darkness. The question gnawed at her during the next exercise, a night op simulated ambush. Students positioned, fake rounds chambered, blanks cracking across the valley. But somewhere in the chaos, the simulation went wrong. Live fire. No one knew how it slipped in. A single round, sharp crack, too real to mistake. Burke went down screaming, clutching his shoulder. Blood in the dirt. Panic erupted. Students scattered, shouting. Instructors rushed forward, radios exploding with static. Stacy dropped to her knees beside Burke. Pressure, tourniquet, calm hands, calm voice. Stay with me, breathe. He stared at her, eyes wide with terror. This was supposed to be. I know, you'll make it, hold on. Morrison arrived seconds later, barking orders. Medics sprinted in. The chaos blurred. But Stacy's mind had already shifted. Wind, angles, muzzle flash from the tree line. Someone wasn't part of the exercise. Someone was hunting them. She grabbed Burke's rifle, rolled to prone and sighted in. There, movement. Her finger brushed the trigger, then froze. Conditioning slammed her like a wall. Without authorization, her shot would be clumsy, wrong. She would miss. Her body betrayed her. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Sparrow Six, execute. The words unlocked her. Her hand steadied. The trigger pull was smooth, the shot precise. A shadow in the tree line fell. Silence followed, broken only by Burke's ragged breathing. The medics dragged him onto a stretcher. The instructors scrambled to contain the story. The students whispered in shock. Anderson's eyes locked on her, wide with realization. You, he breathed, you just saved all of us. Stacy lowered the rifle, her hands trembling now. Because she knew what none of them did. Without authorization, she couldn't have done it. And that truth terrified her more than the bullet that almost killed Burke. Later, alone in the infirmary, she sat beside Burke's bed. He was pale but stable, IV dripping. You didn't hesitate, he whispered. You saw it before anyone else. You saved me. She shook her head. I hesitated longer than I should have. He frowned. Why? Because I'm not free, she thought. Because I'm only allowed to be myself when they unlock me. But all she said was, because I'm still learning. Outside the infirmary, Carter and Davidson argued in low voices. She's too visible, Carter snapped. The students are starting to see her for what she is. She just saved one of them, Davidson countered. That makes it worse. Now they'll worship her. Davidson was silent a long moment. Maybe worship isn't the problem. Maybe the problem is we've been trying to cage something that was never meant to be caged. Carter's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Colonel. Tools that think they're free eventually cut the hand that holds them. Neither of them noticed Morrison, listening from the shadows, her expression unreadable. Back in her quarters, Stacy stared at her reflection in the dark window. She saw two faces, the woman who failed, the woman who never missed. And between them, the woman she longed to be. Not a mask, not a weapon. Just herself. But could such a self even exist in this world? Why did the mission orders feel heavier than a rifle in her hands? The folder slid across the table, stamped with red ink. Classified. Operational deployment. Morrison's eyes flicked to Stacy as she accepted it, but Carter's expression stayed flat, clinical, as though handing her a death sentence were routine. Inside, maps of the Syrian desert, photos of a compound, heat signatures, and one image that made Stacy's chest tighten. A boy, maybe 16, face blurred for privacy, tagged VIP priority. General Whitaker's son, kidnapped during a goodwill visit. The ransom demand was already circulating online. The general had sworn the army would not negotiate. Which meant rescue. Which meant her. The debrief was blunt. 2 Overwatch teams, 1 infiltration unit. Stacy assigned as Overwatch lead, Jackson her spotter again. Carter's words clinical as ever. Your task is precision elimination of hostile threats outside the compound. Collateral must be 0. Timing must be exact. You are not to reveal your role to infiltration team members unless necessary. Understood? Yes, ma'am. But inside, her thoughts churned. She knew what they were really saying. You are Sparrow Six again. You are the leash we release only when we must. And that truth dug at her ribs like shrapnel. The desert at night was a living thing. Wind sweeping sand into whispering patterns. Heat lingering in the rocks even as the air cooled. She lay prone on the ridge, Barrett steady, scope aligned. Jackson beside her, rangefinder humming softly. The compound was a fortress of shadows and floodlights. Guards paced the perimeter. Trucks idled near the gates. Inside, through the scope's glass, she saw the faint glimmer of movement, shapes shifting in dim windows. Her heartbeat slowed. The ridge became the range. The desert became geometry. Target 1, Jackson whispered. North Tower, range 1,200 meters, wind 5 knots west. She adjusted, breath fired. The guard dropped, silent. Target 2, east wall. Breath squeezed, silence. One by one, the perimeter thinned. No alarms, no panic, just quiet subtraction. But with each pull of the trigger, the same thought returned. This isn't freedom. This is permission. And if they never said the words, if Morrison hadn't whispered Sparrow 6 before launch, would I even be capable right now? Or would I still be failing at 200 yards? The thought haunted her between every shot. The infiltration team breached, shadows slipping through gaps she had carved. Suppressed fire popped like distant sparks. The radio crackled, room secure, advancing. Minutes stretched, her scope swept. Windows, rooftops, alleys, every detail alive. Then movement, a muzzle flash, roof far side. Shooter roof south corner, Jackson hissed. She adjusted instantly. The Barrett kicked. The rooftop figure dropped. But her stomach knotted. Because she had seen the face before firing, barely more than a boy. 17, maybe 18. The silence after the shot felt louder than gunfire. The radio snapped alive. VIP secured, moving to extraction. Stacy exhaled, mission success, lives saved. But her fingers still trembled on the trigger, not from adrenaline, from the weight of that boy's eyes in her scope. Back at base, debrief was quick. All hostiles neutralized, VIP recovered unharmed. Success, applause, commendations promised. But in the quiet after, Stacy sat alone in the tent, cleaning her rifle with slow, deliberate motions. Her mind replayed the shot, the boy's face, the life taken before it had fully begun. And the gnawing realization, she hadn't chosen, she had obeyed. Morrison found her there, hours later. You saved him, Morrison said softly. The general's son, do you understand the weight of that? Stacy's hands didn't stop moving on the rifle. I understand the weight of the one I couldn't save. Morrison's eyes softened. You didn't kill him, the war did, the situation did. Stacy finally looked up, but it was the Army's finger on that trigger. It was mine. Silence hung heavy. Morrison sat across from her. Tell me the truth. When you pulled the trigger, did it feel like your choice? The question sliced deeper than any reprimand. Stacy swallowed. No, it felt authorized, like I was a weapon they switched on, not a person making a choice. Her voice broke, soft but sharp, and that terrifies me more than missing ever did. Meanwhile, Carter and Davidson, were locked in argument across the compound. "She's compromised," Carter insisted. "She's emotionally unstable, questioning control. We cannot have a weapon doubting its own leash." Davidson's tone was calm but edged. "She's not a weapon, she's a soldier, the best we've got." "No, she's an experiment, and experiments that think they're human become liabilities." Davidson leaned closer. "Maybe what scares you isn't that she's unstable. Maybe it's that she's starting to realize she has power you can't control." Carter's eyes narrowed. Power without control is chaos, and chaos doesn't survive in the army. The next day, the general himself visited. Whitaker, stern, stone-faced, carrying the exhaustion of a man who nearly lost his son. He stood before Stacy, studying her like a puzzle. "My boy, alive because of you," he said quietly. "That's a debt I can never repay." She stood at attention, silent. "But you don't look proud," he observed. Her throat tightened. "Sir, I did my duty." "No," he shook his head. "Duty looks different. This is something else." His voice softened. "Tell me, Corporal, what's haunting you?" Her chest constricted. For a moment she wanted to say it all, that she felt like a weapon on a leash, that she didn't know if her choices were her own, that every life she took blurred her humanity a little more. But she couldn't, not to him, not here. So she said only, "Permission, sir, permission haunts me." The general frowned, not understanding, but he let it go. "Permission or not," he said, "you saved my son, remember that." Then he left, leaving her with the silence she couldn't escape. In the weeks that followed, she trained new students again. The controlled revelation protocol spread quietly, whispered about in circles she never entered. Soldiers left her classes sharper, smarter, more capable. But inside, the questions only grew louder. Am I teaching them to be free, or teaching them to be controlled like me? Late at night, she wrote in her notebook, the pages filling with words she never spoke aloud. Freedom without purpose is chaos. Purpose without freedom is slavery. Where do I exist between those two? She stared at the sentence for hours, as if the ink might rearrange itself into an answer. It never did. Then came the call. Another mission, another hostage, another rifle in her hands. But this time, Morrison caught her arm before she boarded. "Stacy," she said softly, "before you go out there, answer me honestly. Are you Sparrow Six or are you you?" The question stopped her cold. She wanted to answer, to know, to believe one version was real and the other was the mask. But the truth was sharper, crueler. "I don't know," she whispered. Morrison's eyes held hers. "Then maybe it's time you found out." On the flight out, Stacy sat in the dark of the chopper, Barrett across her knees, wind roaring through the open doors. Soldiers around her whispered, prayed, or sat silent. But Stacy closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She didn't whisper prayers. She didn't seek comfort. She asked herself the one question no one else had dared. If they never gave me permission again, if they never said the words, would I still be capable? The answer, whatever it was, would decide who she truly was. And for the first time, she resolved to find out. Not for the army, not for Carter, not even for Morrison. For herself. Why was the sky so calm when her chest felt like a storm? The Black Hawk cut across the Turkish border under moonlight, its rotors thundering against the night. Inside, Stacy checked the Barrett twice, then a third time, fingers steady but heart racing. She could feel Jackson's eyes on her. He'd become her shadow, her reluctant witness. This mission wasn't like Syria. No general's sons, no clear VIPs, just villagers. Farmers taken hostage by a breakaway militia, held as human shields against Turkish armor pressing the border. The army needed proof of surgical capability. Stacy was the proof. And she knew it. They landed on a barren ridge. Rocks, wind, emptiness. Below, a valley cradled the village. Lanterns flickered in doorways. Figures moved on rooftops. Armed guards. civilians forced to the square like bargaining chips. Jackson set up the spotting scope. Targets everywhere, no clear lanes. This is impossible. Stacy scanned, breathing slow. The villagers were clustered too close. The militia had thought of everything, hostages as cover, guards embedded in the crowd. Her stomach twisted. The army hadn't chosen her to save lives tonight. They'd chosen her to prove something. And for the first time, she wondered if proving it would damn her. The radio cracked, Morrison's voice, calm, steady. "Overwatch report." Jackson answered. Multiple hostiles, civilians intermingled, no clean shots. Static, then Carter's colder tone. "Sparrow 6, authorization is pending. Hold fire until command approves." Stacy's finger brushed the trigger guard. The word pending echoed like a curse. She sighted a rooftop guard. Through her scope, she saw his jawline, the angle of his rifle. He leaned against a chimney, scanning lazily. Easy target. But the leash held. No authorization. Her hands trembled, the muzzle drifting. Then it happened. A door burst open in the square. A girl, maybe 12, bolted, breaking from the crowd. Panic in her small frame, feet pounding across dirt. The guard on the rooftop raised his rifle. Time fractured. Stacy's scope locked on. Breath slowed. Geometry, wind, trajectory, all aligned in her head like second nature. But no words came over the radio. No execute. No permission. If she waited, the girl would die. If she fired, she would break the leash. Her chest ached with the weight of it. The whole war seemed balanced on her finger. And for the first time, she asked herself, what if I don't need permission? She squeezed. The Barrett thundered. The guard's head snapped back. He fell, body sliding off the roof. The girl stumbled, froze, then darted back into the crowd, alive. Jackson's breath caught. You fired without." "I know," Stacy whispered. Her voice shook, but her hands were steady. The radio hissed. Morrison's voice sharp, urgent. "Overwatch, confirmed shot." Jackson hesitated. Stacy answered. "Target down, civilian saved." Static, then Carter's voice icy. "Sparrow 6, you were not authorized." Stacy's jaw tightened. Neither was his bullet. Silence. Then chaos. The village erupted. Guards shouting, scrambling, civilians screaming. Muzzles flared from rooftops. The infiltration team rushed forward, blindsided by the sudden escalation. Stacy fired again and again, each shot surgical, exact, not waiting for permission now, not Sparrow 6. Just Stacy walls. The militia collapsed within minutes. Overwatch precision tore holes in their defenses, buying time for the team to sweep through. Civilians were rushed from the square, herded toward safety. By dawn, the valley was quiet. Smoke drifted from rooftops. The hostages were alive. The mission had succeeded because she had broken the rules. Back at base, the silence in the debriefing room was worse than shouting. Carter's eyes were knives. "You compromised command authority. You violated conditioning parameters. You disobeyed direct orders." Davidson's tone was measured and saved 30 civilians. "By chance," Carter snapped. "She gambled." "No," Jackson blurted. Everyone turned. He swallowed hard, then steadied his voice. "She calculated. She acted when no one else would. She was Sparrow 6 out there. She was herself. And it worked." Carter's glare could have burned through him. "Your loyalty is misplaced, Corporal." But Stacy's gaze stayed on the table, not ashamed, not proud, just steady. Because for the first time, she knew the truth. The leash was broken. That night, Morrison came to her quarters. No clipboard, no orders, just quiet presence. "You crossed a line today," Morrison said softly. "I know. And you can't go back." Stacy looked up. "Maybe I don't want to." Morrison studied her. "Do you realize what that means? You'll never be trusted by command again. Carter will bury you in reports, call you reckless, dangerous. They'll try to erase you." "I know," Stacy repeated. Morrison's voice dropped lower. "So why do it?" Stacy's answer was quiet but unshakable. "Because for the first time the shot was mine." Morrison's expression softened, almost proud, almost sad. "Then you're free, Stacy, but freedom has a cost." The cost came sooner than expected. A week later, she was called into a room with Carter, Davidson, and two silent officers in suits. "Effective immediately," Carter said coldly. "You are removed from the Sparrow Six program. You will be reassigned pending review." Davidson's jaw clenched. "That's not reassignment, that's exile." Carter didn't flinch. "It's survival for the Army, and maybe for her." She slid a folder across the table. No maps this time, no missions, just a single sheet. "Fort Irwin Training Battalion, instructor duty." A polite way of saying, "We're shelving you." That night Stacy sat on her bunk, the folder unopened beside her. Soldiers walked past outside, laughing, shouting, living. She touched the Barrett's case, tracing its edges. For years she had lived between two selves, failure and perfection, incompetence and myth, always waiting for permission, always caged. Now for the first time she had acted as herself, no leash, no code words. And the Army's answer was exile. Her chest tightened, but not from despair. From clarity. If freedom had a cost, she was willing to pay it. Because silence with dignity was better than obedience with chains. Morrison found her before dawn, a small smile hidden in her eyes. "They're sending you away," she said. Stacy nodded. "Good," Morrison whispered. "It means you're finally dangerous to them." Stacy stepped into the cool desert air, duffel slung over her shoulder. The sky was pale, the horizon bleeding orange with sunrise. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Because she wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Why did exile feel so much like freedom? The bus ride into Fort Irwin was long and empty, desert stretching endless in every direction. No one waiting at the gate, no fanfare, just a new post, a new cage with wider bars. She was greeted not by commanders but by a clerk with hollow eyes. "Corporal Walls, assigned to training battalion. You'll report to range detail at 500. Rifle qualification oversight. Any questions?" She shook her head. It was clear she wasn't here to shine. She was here to disappear. The days fell into routine. Rows of recruits stumbling through drills, rifles shaking in their hands, dust, heat. The same commands barked over and over. "Adjust your stance. Check your sights. Stop flinching." She walked the line quietly, clipboard in hand like any other range officer. Invisible again. But invisibility had never scared her. What scared her was wasting it. So she began small. One recruit trembling too hard to pull the trigger. She knelt, whispering steady words, showing him how to breathe. He fired. The round hit center. His shoulders straightened. Another missing wide at 200 yards. She traced the heat shimmer in the air, explained how light bends. The next shot rang steel. Each one a spark, tiny awakenings. She wasn't just correcting their aim. She was teaching them to see. Within weeks, whispers spread. "Corporal Walls can fix anyone. She explains things nobody else does. She doesn't yell, she shows you." The recruits listened to her in ways they never listened to anyone else, because she carried no pride, no demand for respect, just quiet patience. And still, every night, she sat alone in her quarters, staring at her hands, remembering the desert shot that had broken her leash. She wondered if this, teaching kids to shoot straighter, was what freedom really meant. Or if it was just another kind of cage. Carter hadn't forgotten her. Reports arrived monthly. Subject Walls maintains low profile, influence minimal, assignment contained. Contained. But Morrison found ways to slip through, letters that weren't letters, keep going. They're watching. The army is bigger than Carter. Small reminders that someone still believed she wasn't meant to vanish. The breaking point came one scorching afternoon. A recruit froze during stress fire. Sirens blaring, blanks cracking, smoke in the air. He dropped his rifle, covered his ears, eyes wide with terror. The other instructors barked at him. "Get up, pick it up, you'll wash out." Stacy knelt beside him, blocking their shouts. "Listen to me," she said softly. "It's not noise, it's rhythm. Let it pass through you. Breathe with it. Control the beat, don't fight it." His shaking slowed. She placed the rifle back in his hands, guided him into position, whispered numbers in his ear. The next shot hit clean, then another, then another. The instructors watched in stunned silence. Later, one muttered to another, "She just turned a dropout into a shooter." It wasn't in the manual, it wasn't authorized, but it worked. And soon more recruits sought her out, quietly, secretly. Not because they wanted higher scores, but because they wanted to learn the way she taught, human, patient, precise. At night, recruits left notes on her bunk. "Thank you. I thought I'd fail. You made me believe I could." She kept them folded in a small tin box, a secret weight on her nightstand. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just breaking the leash. She was teaching others how to live without one. But word spread higher than she intended. Davidson arrived unannounced, dust still clinging to his boots from the airstrip. He found her on the range, kneeling beside another recruit, showing him how to adjust for crosswind. When the recruit fired and hit, Davidson finally spoke. "You're doing it here too." She rose, expression unreadable. "Doing what, sir?" "Creating soldiers who see more than they're supposed to. Soldiers who think for themselves." She met his gaze. "Isn't that what you want?" His voice dropped. "It's what I want, it's not what Carter wants, you know that." "Then why are you here?" "Because Carter's already pushing for full removal. Discharge. If she gets her way, this ends." Stacy's jaw tightened. "Then let her. Maybe I'm done being theirs." But Davidson shook his head. "You don't get it. They'll erase you, everything you've built. These recruits will forget your name. Your lessons will vanish into paperwork. You'll vanish." Her chest ached, not for herself, for the tin box of folded notes, for the kids who believed in her. She swallowed hard. "Then tell me what choice I have." Davidson's silence was answer enough. That night she walked the perimeter alone. Stars burned above the desert sky. The air was cool, the silence deep. She thought of the ridge, the desert, the village, every shot she'd ever taken, every life saved, every life ended. And she asked herself the question Morrison had once asked, "What do you want?" The answer came softer than she expected. Not freedom, not control. Purpose. Weeks later, the test came. A training exercise gone wrong. Convoy ambushed during a simulated drill, except it wasn't simulated. A local militia, armed with stolen weapons, crashing straight into the path of unprepared recruits. Chaos erupted. Instructors panicked, recruits froze, bullets snapped overhead. Real bullets this time. Stacy moved before thinking, pushing recruits into cover, snapping orders. Her voice cut through terror like a blade. "Two on overwatch now. Cover that gap. Don't shoot wild, breathe, call it fire." The recruits obeyed, not because of rank, because of trust. Shots rang out. Militia scattered. A firefight that should have ended in massacre turned into an organized defense. When the dust settled, not one recruit had died. But everyone knew why. Because Corporal Stacy Walls had taken command. Afterward, the battalion commander pulled her aside. "You saved them," he admitted. "But you broke protocol. You weren't in command. You weren't even supposed to engage." She met his eyes calmly. Permission didn't matter. Lives did. He had no answer. Reports flew back to Washington. Carter furious. Davidson silent. Morrison sending only one line, "She's proving you wrong." And in the barracks, recruits whispered her name like a secret legend. She saw it before it happened. She gave orders like she'd been doing it forever. She saved us. For the first time, Stacy realized exile wasn't her burial. It was her proving ground. That night she unfolded the tin box of notes. One by one, she read them, hands steady. She didn't know what the army would do next. Whether Carter would win, whether Davidson could shield her, whether Morrison's faith would be enough. But she knew one thing now. They could exile her, silence her, even erase her name. But they couldn't erase what she'd given these soldiers. And maybe that was purpose enough. Why did endings always arrive disguised as orders? The summons came at dawn. A plain envelope slid under her door. Report to command. 900. No insignia, no signature, just a place and time. She knew before opening it. The whispers, the stares, Davidson's warnings, all pointed here. Carter had finally moved the pieces. And Stacy Walls was about to vanish. The room was smaller than she expected. A folding table, 3 chairs, and a single recorder blinking red. Carter sat across from her, immaculate as always, a stack of papers at her elbow. Davidson was there too, shoulders rigid. And Morrison, eyes steady, hands folded, a calm presence in the storm. Carter's tone was surgical. "Corporal Walls, your record is inconsistent. Failure in training, insubordination in Syria, unauthorized engagement in Turkey, and now violation of chain of command during the Irwin incident. We've reached a decision." She slid a document across the table. Administrative separation, other than honorable. The words hit like a bullet. Other than honorable, not discharge, erasure. Her years, her sacrifices, her blood, all rewritten as failure. Davidson's jaw tightened. Morrison's eyes burned. But Carter only leaned back, satisfied. "You're not a soldier, Corporal. You're an anomaly, and anomalies do not belong in the Army." For a long time, Stacy didn't move. Her hands rested on the table, steady. Her face gave nothing away, but inside, memories rushed like floodwater. The first time she'd flinched at the range. The whispers in the chow hall. The ridge shot that saved the general's son. The girl in the square, alive because she broke the leash. The recruits at Irwin, clutching folded notes, whispering, "You made me believe." Her entire life balanced on a single sheet of paper. Morrison spoke first, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut steel. "With respect, ma'am, you're wrong. She's not an anomaly. She's the proof of what's possible when you stop underestimating people. She turned recruits who were failing into soldiers. She saved civilians when your protocol would have let them die. You can bury her name, but you can't bury what she's given." Carter's eyes flashed. This is not about inspiration. This is about control, and she refuses to be controlled. Silence. Then Davidson leaned forward, voice low. "Maybe that's the point." Carter turned on him. "You'd let a weapon walk free." "She's not a weapon," Davidson said. "She's a soldier, and maybe the Army needs fewer weapons and more soldiers." The recorder blinked red, marking every word. Stacy finally reached for the paper. Her eyes traced the letters slowly, carefully. Then she folded it in half. Then again, until it was a small square between her fingers. She set it back on the table and spoke softly. "You've taken everything you can take. My record, my name, my future in uniform, that's fine. But there's one thing you can't take." Carter raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Stacy looked at Morrison, at Davidson, at the door where soldiers just like her were probably waiting for instruction, never knowing her story. Her voice was steady. "What I gave them." Carter's lips tightened. She snapped the file shut. "This hearing is over." But Stacy wasn't broken. As she walked out, Morrison touched her arm, whispering, "Whatever they do, you're not erased." Davidson gave a curt nod. silent solidarity. And Carter's voice followed her out, cold and final. She's finished. Finished. That word followed her back to the barracks, where her duffel sat packed, to the bus ride out of Fort Irwin, desert fatting in the window, to the small motel room where she spent her first night as nobody again. Finished. But when she opened the tin box of folded notes, the word crumbled. Thank you. You made me believe. I thought I'd fail. Finished. No. The Army could stamp her papers, erase her from records, pretend she never existed, but they couldn't erase the lives she touched, the whispers she left behind. They couldn't erase the girl who'd run across the square, the recruits who'd hit steel for the first time, the boy in the general's arms. And they couldn't erase the truth she had finally claimed. She was more than Sparrow Six, more than failure. She was Stacy Walls. And she was free. Weeks later, she stood on a civilian shooting range outside Denver, wearing plain clothes, hair pulled back, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. People lined up at the firing line, veterans, young men, women who'd never touched a rifle. They missed shots, they flinched, they doubted themselves. And Stacy walked the line quietly, clipboard in hand, whispering calm corrections. Adjust half a mil down. Breathe with the rhythm, not against it. Don't fight the noise, control it. One by one, the shots started hitting. One by one, heads lifted in disbelief. They didn't know her name. They didn't know her past. They just knew she could see what they couldn't. And for the first time, that was enough. Sometimes, recruits asked her how she learned. She always smiled faintly. By failing, more times than I can count. They laughed, not knowing how true it was. But when she lay in bed at night, the silence pressed close, and she thought of the Army, of Carter's cold eyes, of Morrison's steady faith, of Davidson's quiet respect. She thought of what she'd lost and what she'd found. And she realized something. Maybe dignity doesn't shout. Maybe it doesn't wear medals or carry records or need recognition. Maybe dignity is silence, the silence of breathing through fear, the silence of pulling the trigger when lives depend on it, the silence of knowing who you are even when the world tries to erase you. The Army would never write her story. But the recruits she trained would carry pieces of it. The civilians she taught now would carry echoes of it. And one day, when they faced their own moments of doubt, maybe they would remember the quiet woman who told them failure was only camouflage, and that belief was the real weapon. And that would be enough. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in the silence it leaves behind, lives are saved.